Hi, my name's Travis Good, and I'm a maker woodworker with a predisposition to digital fabrication. About 6 years ago, I was really tempted and followed through on getting a Chinese laser. It married design, it married computers, it was a smart tool, and I really enjoyed that. Around that time, I guess about 5 years ago, I came across a video series by a guy in the UK named Sadler, and I watched him go on a journey similar to mine. He was following his muse, playing with a toy, getting a great learning experience out of it, and having fun. The big difference between him and me, well, there are several big differences, but he was documenting what he was learning, and I was learning from his efforts. So over the course of years, I continued to watch. About 4 years ago, I started teaching lasers, and I would always tell my students about this series because it was something that I found valuable. And when Russ, who had not only been on a journey of discovery, but a journey of improvement, sort of coming up with new engineering answers to questions that he had, Russ had been on a journey of improving the laser that both he and I, coincidentally, happened to have purchased. And I wasn't the only one who was noticing this. There were thousands of people around the world, including Cloudray. And apparently, not too long ago, maybe a year, Cloudray said, look, Russ, what if we took your ideas and put them into a newly designed version of that same laser you had? And it's a smart implementation of a lot of really great ideas with some much improved fundamentals. And I'd like to just tell you a little bit about the contrast between the old and the new and how happy I am with my decision. This is my Cloudray laser, and I have it all set up, and I've been using it for the last few weeks. And in a summary, it's just wonderful. But when I first received it, it was unboxed and was sitting next to my old laser, which on the surface looked just like this one. And when my wife came in, she looked at the two, not seeing why I had just spent thousands of dollars, and said, well, what's the difference? Well, what I'm here now doing is to try to describe to you what the difference is, because it's true. On the surface, as you are flipping through your options for buying lasers online, you'll see a lot of them that kind of look like this, but it's below the surface that you need to look in order to find out if what you're getting is a good laser or not. And this is a good laser, and it's good for two fundamental reasons. This particular laser has an investment in better quality parts, which I'll describe to you, and it has an investment of re-engineering, the kinds of things that Russ came up with as he was going through his years-long journey with his laser. Let's tackle these two topics so at least you have an understanding of the big picture. I can't begin to do the detailed level of justice that you might want, so we're just going to do a high level. When it comes to quality, one conclusion Russ drew after long time dialogue with his community was that if you're going to buy a Chinese laser and you're going to go for the cheap, you're probably going to get a laser that has two very important components that are not of great quality, and therefore it will affect the performance of your laser. Those two components are a good power supply and a good tube. If they are off market, if they are rejects, if they just are poor quality, they're cheaper, and people who are hacking these things together can put them out to market for lower prices. A machine with a better power supply and a better tube is just going to undeniably cost more because it includes higher cost components. Let me just show you 4 in this laser, 2 of which are the power supply and tube. I'm going right now to the right side of the laser, and we've opened up the side panel. And I brought you here because behind the coiled wire is a big black box. And it's the power supply, which I want to show you the label for. But let's pause and just appreciate what we're seeing here. This is just sort of a pervasive example of quality. Look at the labeling. Look at the layout. Look at the wiring. This was put together well. This was not hacked. This was put together by people who knew what they were doing. And it shows. So back to the power supply. This is the label on that power supply. You want to verify for yourself that it's a good power supply? You can go to the Cloudray site and you can look up the MYJG 80 watt. It's the kind of thing you'd want in a quality laser. And there you have it, proof that this is part of the Russ-Spec laser by Cloudray. Now I'm going to take you to below the bed. Now, the bed can go up and down. That's the Z-axis. And on most, if not every other laser in this category, the way you move up and down on the Z-axis is you use a manual thumb screw, and you go up and down. The bed will probably wobble as it goes up and down, and that means that when you're cutting, you kind of have to leave the bed exactly in one position, because if you change it, it'll shift in the X or Y direction. Okay, look at this chamber here. You can see the depth to which the Z travel can. You can lower the bed quite a bit, which is useful for putting things into the laser to be able to etch on them. But the real message here is powered Z-axis and quality. The stepper motor in the back is obviously driving a belt system, which goes across these vertical screws. You see two of them in the background. There are two in the foreground off camera. And the Z is driven by that stepper motor. But look at those screws. When you see those babies turning and you see the bed going up and down, it's steady as a rock in the X and Y direction. It's just fabulous. And it's a surprise and it's wonderful. So the second item beyond the power supply that's quality components is the Z-axis. Now, because my laser is in place and it's a big hassle to pull it away from the wall and open up the tube chamber, I just went ahead and took a picture of the label on the tube. And you can see that it's a 60 watt C70 tube. Again, go off to the Cloudray site, read up on this tube. You should feel very happy that it's going to be a quality tube for your use. Now, it is 1250 millimeters long. And my last one, I think, was either 700 or 800 millimeters. They sold it to me as a 50 watt laser. I think when I measured it, it was around 42 watts. And you just can't get 50 watts into the housing of this machine if it's 800 or more millimeters. This one's 1250. How is that? There you have it. That big protrusion on the side, which I have to admit was kind of a hassle to figure out how to squeeze it into my shop, but it was a worthwhile effort because that length of tube, 55 millimeter diameter, 1250 millimeters long, produces a beautiful laser beam which just cuts like butter. And what could be more important in a laser than a laser tube that produces great laser beam? So the power supply and the laser tube themselves are a huge part of this. Then there's the Z-axis, and then there's the controller. This is the control panel for the controller. Honestly, my last controller was really good too. I don't have anything against what's called the Ruida 6442. Most of the lasers in this category do have that, and it's a perfectly good controller. But I have to admit, it was quite frustrating in a couple of ways. For instance, you couldn't access the Z-axis directly. Then again, you didn't have any reason to because it wasn't a powered Z-axis. Here you have powered Z-axis, and if you'll notice just to the left of the four-way arrows, there's Z up and Z down. Another thing is when you want to enter numbers to go to a particular position or change a particular value in the configuration, there's no direct access to numbers. There's no keypad, and here you have a keypad. And it is newer version of the controllers from Ruida. So it is another example of they invested more, and this is the fourth component, I'd say that for every single machine that's made, there will always be a differential between this machine and the masses because there is this investment in quality. So that deals with the quality component side of things. The second reason this is a better laser is because of all the re-engineering that took place. I've been watching this particular generic laser over the course of the last 6 years. I got to tell you, there is very little innovating going on. I've seen the price go down quite a bit and recently go back up again, but it has not been something that people have worked on improving. It's been the goal of reducing price to market. And that's laudable, I suppose. It gets it into more people's hands, but not if you want a quality laser cutter. So Russ, over the course of his journey, kept answering the questions, but why is it done that way? And couldn't I do it better? That doesn't produce a very good result. How can I improve upon it? Those kinds of things, which you see play out in his videos over the course of time, are what were answered. His answers to his questions are what became the re-engineering features, which happily, a year ago, Cloudray picked up on and then started to work with Russ to build them into a machine. If you're at all interested in his videos, I wrote at the bottom here the name of his YouTube channel, SarbarMultimedia. He has over 200 videos, lots of stuff to learn from. It's in the last 20 or so where you'd be able to find some summary videos of this machine. Go and fish them out. They were in the high 190s, early 200s, something like that. But it's the ideas in those videos that are being built into this. And the nice thing about those ideas is it's not an incremental cost each time necessarily. It is just a smarter way of doing things. And I'm only going to scratch the surface over the next few slides here. This is a component that Cloudray happened to have, and they built it in. This was, I think, outside of Russ's ideas, but the idea is that any tube you have, you don't want to overdrive it. If you put too much current into it, you damage it over time. It lasts for fewer numbers of hours if it's overtaxed. And while on the surface this is just a milliamp meter, which tells you what the current is going to the tube, that dial on the right-hand side, that wheel, is where you can set the maximum current output, which is beautiful. You don't have to be anxious about whether you are overtaxing your tube. You set it and you forget it, and you're not going to overtax your tube. Really great for extending the life of your tube. Here we have just a picture of the head, and there are so many things that I could but won't talk about. In this particular picture, I'm only going to talk about two things. One is weight, and the second is adjustability. Adjustability being a recurring theme throughout this laser. Adjustability to get the laser beam aligned properly. He's added additional adjustments that can be done that help you with aligning your beam. But let's go back to the first one, weight. If you were to look on the head of most lasers in this class, you'd see a lot more metal, a lot more attached to the head. And if you have a heavy head, then if you're etching and you're going back and forth, you have all that extra momentum that has to slow down, turn around, and come back. At the other end, slow down, turn around, and come back. And if you have that way, you're limited in what you can do in terms of speeds. I could do around 200 millimeters per second on my old laser. This I can use at around 1,000 millimeters per second in certain circumstances. Remarkable. Fantastic. And in the other theme of adjustability, those two screws that you see on the left-hand side of the head, you can move the head up and down. That's to position the mirror in a different place relative to the beam. That kind of adjustability is what we'll see throughout. There's a lot in this and the next few pictures, but I'm just going to touch the surface. The point is, these are ideas that Russ had. They manifest themselves in solutions, and those solutions have made it into this laser. There, just below the black block on the left, which is the number 2 mirror, you see some adjustability to the right and to the left. In other words, towards the back of the machine or towards the front of the machine. More adjustability. If you were to go all the way back to the tube, you'd find similar adjustability really nice for getting a well-guided beam to your workpiece so the work can be done. Something that's not obvious is in the bottom right, you see the belt, and the teeth are facing outward. Suffice it to say that there was a problem with something called curtains, and by re-engineering how you drive the head, you ended up solving that problem, a problem which every other laser manufacturer currently still has. This one does not. That white dial just in front of the black circle on the right, that's something that you can turn to adjust your airflow from off to on. And this is air that's from a compressor that drives air down onto your workpiece. In some circumstances, you want little air. In some circumstances, you want a lot of air. And normally, that's not easily available to you for adjusting. Here it is. And all these are just smart ideas that found a cost-effective implementation. And they'll show up in every one of these lasers. Here's another example. Whenever you're cutting, you're producing smoke. You need to get that smoke out of the chamber. Well, in order to get smoke out of the chamber through the fan in the back, you need to be able to get air into the chamber to replace it. And yet, you don't want to have the lid open because you don't want to have the laser exposed. The laser light is potentially dangerous. Well, here you have a solution. Along the darkest portion underneath this rectangle on the middle of the picture going down to the left is a gap. That gap is to draw air into the chamber. You can close the lid and air will always flow evenly across the bed and evacuate the smoke from your chamber. Smart. Just plain smart. Smart and safe. It just had to be thought through and then implemented. And that's what we see in this machine. And just one last example. A last example among many. He spent years figuring this stuff out, and you can learn more about it on his videos. But I remember when he was trying to work on the left side of his machine. On this side of the machine, for instance, you can see the number 2 mirror there with the brass thumb wheels and the black box. That's something he had to get to. It was hard to get to. You couldn't work on the drive system because the stepper motors and all the screws, it was just inaccessible. So he said, forget that. And he put a big square in the side with a piece of plexiglass on it so you can look through for curiosity's sake, but you can take that plastic window off and gain access to all of it. Just smart. Makes your ability to manage and maintain the machine a whole lot easier. So, as I said, it looks just like any of those other lasers out there, and no doubt costs a good chunk more. Some of that is totally understandable because of the quality components that are put into it. Some of it is understandable because there is a return on re-engineering and good ideas. But this machine performs fabulously, and I'm really thrilled with it. I've only talked a little bit about those 2 categories of things that make this machine special. There's a lot more to be learned in Russ's videos. Not only that, but I've only talked about the machine, not how you can use it. For instance, you can add accessories. You could add a rotary attachment. You could add a camera. You could use different software, like the wonderful Lightburn software. You could use different materials in this thing, from leather to glass to acrylic to wood. So much. And there are lots of techniques, from 3D engraving to grayscale picture reproduction to just ways of treating the wood, like with borax to get a greater contrast. So many topics. A lot of them touched on in Russ's journey. So if you would like to consider a laser in this class, I have zero hesitation. And frankly, I don't get anything out of this. I'm just a customer. I just love my machine and want to share my enthusiasm with others. I can have very little hesitation in saying that this is a fantastic machine and giving it a thumbs up rating. If you are considering a machine in this class, do consider this Russ-Spec machine by Cloudray. it is genuinely a winner. Thanks.